Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the operator training. My name is Hannah Hickam. I'm the executive assistant, and I'll be your host for today. We're just going to give folks a few minutes to jump on. And while we're doing that, if you have any questions left over from last time, just drop those in the chat, or you can also raise your hand if you would like to ask it with your voice. All right, again, folks, just joining us. It's the minute past the top of the hour, and we're just going to give folks another 4 minutes to jump on the call. In the meanwhile, if you have questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. All right, and I still see the participants are climbing, so we'll still give folks that 1 more minute to jump on, and then we'll go straight into the Engineering Integrity's annual spill report by Steve Wheeler. Remember that we're going to take questions at the end, that way we can get you better answers. So just put those in the chat, and as you think of them, and we'll read those all off and answer those all for you at the end of the session. All right, and it's 9:05. It looks like the participants have leveled off, so just give me a moment to switch gears here. And first up is Engineering Integrity's annual spills report with Steve Wheeler. Steve, can you check your mic real quick?
Yeah. Do you have me, Hannah?
Yeah, I do. Great. All right, take it away.
Alrighty. Bear with me, trying to manage two screens at once here. So good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Wheeler. I'm with the Engineering Integrity Group. I've done this this presentation in the past several times. It's been a while, obviously, with the COVID stuff and you know, our form backlog with the new rule changes to the flow line rules. You know, we were working on forms most of the time, so you know, we've tidied it up, and I think we're just going to keep doing this on an annual basis. It kind of tightens up the data a little bit. So yeah, Hannah, can you jump forward one? Yep, so this is just the quick outline of what I'll go through. Typically, I'll load you guys up with quite a few pie charts. It shows the breakdown of the flow line related spills, and that's by our defined categories. So you know, we do have a guidance document that defines all these into, I think it's like 7 or 8 categories. So so we'll go through that. And the breakdown is we've got all the data from 2015 through this 2020 year end. And we'll break it down that way for the regional breakdown as well. So we've got that broken out by both basin and by county. We'll go through some spill trends. You know, we've added some historical data in there, so I think that's that'll be somewhat useful there. And then since we had our integrity group had our hand in adding tank maintenance standards, we're going to go ahead and start reporting on those a little bit. So we've broken out just a little bit of data on that. So just some quick slides. And then I've got one more in there just for some spill volumes that we wanted to cover. So so jump forward one more for us, Hannah. Excuse me. So so like I said, here's the quick breakdown of the spill data going all the way back to 2015. I don't have too many talking points. This is just the data as we've seen it. So a couple caveats here. So this particular chart, it doesn't include two things, and we filter out any Form 19 data that checks the historical box. So we don't add any of those in our analysis. And then with these first few pie chart slides, I don't put in any of the unknowns. So if we still have unexcavated spills, it's on the to-do list for a lot of operators. There's a handful of those that we're going to have every year. So, but for this purpose, you know, we just don't include it for these first few. So we'll go through the unknown stuff here in a few slides. So jump one more for us, Hannah, and we'll go to this year's. So I think you know, the big thing here is the corrosion for the 2020 year is just going to be kind of the through line of this year's talk. You know, historically, you know, if you recall from the last slide, you know, we're at like 44%. You know, and previously we had been at it had hovered around the 40% mark. So if you jump to the next slide here, Hannah, I've got a side by side of both of those two as they so we can kind of see how they look next to each other. So yeah, that 40% mark that it typically hovered at, that was from 2015 to 2019. As far as a numbers breakdown, we were at about 55 of these a year. And then in 2019, we saw an uptick. You know, we didn't get a chance to report on the back end of 2019 to you guys. But this year we're up 65% from that 2015 through 2018 average. So I think what we're seeing here is a lot of end of, or I guess even past the end of the design life of a lot of this carbon steel stuff. So it's really a trend of I think it's going to be a lot more life cycle management, especially in the case of the dump lines is what we continue to see, and that was a particular uptick in the Form 19 data. And I'll talk a little more about the trends overall when we get to it later on. But we'll go a little bit more in depth into that corrosion stuff. So if you jump forward one more for us, Hannah. So this is if operators gave us a little more detail on the type of corrosion, right? We see a lot of microbial induced on the internal side, especially with the produced water. So historically, just to give you guys some a little bit of reference here, the internal corrosion's made up about 50% of what's been reported. 20% is coming externally. So that'd be like this picture here, right? This yellow jacket pipe. That's a vintage that that's obviously no longer in service. We're always going to see FBE coded. So I think that external number is just it's a little down over the 2020 year. We're just not going to see that much in the field anymore. So yeah, I'll just kind of reiterate, just that life cycle management. I did put in incorrect operations here. That's always that's typically our number 2. I think for the 2019 presentation, that ended up being that had a big portion of the pie, so to speak. But that's always the number 2. We always try to emphasize tweaks in procedure, especially with unloading. I think that's one that we just typically see just a handful that are still, it's still just a fixable issue. Valve alignment, make sure we close the right valves at the right time, so to speak. So Hannah, jump to the next one, and I'll kind of go through just the full disclosure of of what we see from the Form 19s. Like I said before, we don't include the historical data. Otherwise, that big gray unknown chunk, that'd be considerably larger. I think overall that continues to trend down. Mark and I, we try to do a bit of outreach and have operators submit this stuff on Form 19s on like a supplemental to include a little more granular data for the root cause of the failure. If you jump to the next one, Hannah, you'll kind of see that, hey, our outreach, thanks to the EHS folks that when I'm asking them about this stuff, everybody's gotten back to me really quick, and I do appreciate that. But like I mentioned earlier, some of this stuff just isn't excavated yet. It's on the to-do list, so we just don't know. So that there's kind of a baseline that we're never really gonna boil it down without waiting, 6 months, a full year after the year end, so to speak. So, but yeah, thanks to those folks for getting back to me really prompt. I do appreciate it. So when we see the next slide here, Hannah, you just kind of see that that unknown chunk of the pie. That's decreased over time. I think for the up through 2019, it was that 28%. It was more like 35%. So, like I say, just testament to everybody just getting back to us and just helping us out with just some of this more informal, just putting these root causes in certain buckets. So if you want to jump to the next one, Hannah, I'll go through this big data dump by county. There's not really too much to note here. It's kind of hard to see any differences without seeing kind of the previous year's data. You don't really get to see many jumps here. But this is just out there because we include this every single time we report this. We just say, hey, here's the breakdown by category, by county. So if you jump to the next one here, Hannah, this is really where it gets a little bit more interesting. Sure, we still have the high point, the high numbers in Weld and Garfield for production purposes. But if you jump actually to the next one, Hannah, that corrosion category, right? Like I say, that's still just going to be the through line here. but that corrosion category, that really peaked in the Garfield Piance area, and that's really that's atypical of what we've seen in the past. So if we have to, if we want to have that conversation about why is corrosion happening, sure, life cycle management is part of it, but where's it happening, and we can just put it on paper for you guys. So if you jump to the next one, it cleans it up when we go to a by basin breakdown. And this is particularly interesting when we look at that corrosion number in the Piance. That's not something that that is typical. Like I say, usually that number is about half of what the DJ is, and I think this is partly due to just aging infrastructure, and despite despite higher production in DJ, we're just trying to make it work in the Piance, so to speak. And I know a lot of operators are, they've taken over some infrastructure that they haven't overseen the full life cycle of. So infrastructure programs, with a couple of the operators that we've been talking with, that just takes time to implement and get new stuff installed, or get the carbon steel out, for especially in the case of, like I say, the dump lines are the big one that's been in a lot of the Form 19 data. So then if we jump to the next slide for us, Hannah, just to kind of let you guys know, right, we're kind of seeing that trend in the Piance go up a little bit. Typically in the past, in the corrosion category, that's been less than half of what the DJ is. So yeah, just to harp on that, that end of the end, or even past the end of the carbon steel design life, I'd point out that, hey, if we can get operators replacing, over time at the very least, a lot of these dump lines that tend to be problematic with failures at like the 6 o'clock position. I think that'd go a long way to this particular peak in numbers, so to speak. So Hannah, jump to the next one for us. So all that said, it's not all gloom and doom. The downward trend is still there. So I really like to emphasize overall the things like incorrect operations, right? Like a valve or material selection being incorrect. It's not a freeze-proof valve. That's something we've seen a lot in the past. A lot of that stuff's been weeding its way out of the spills reporting over time. Sure, there's going to be a base level that we can't do as a regulator or operator can't fully account for. But the trends still look great. So Hannah, if you jump to the next one here, I'd just like to note that we're not the only ones kind of reporting this stuff. We get this out to you guys on an annual basis. I'm not super familiar with the Center Square as a news outlet, but they reported on our non-historical spills trend, and then the Sentinel out of Daily Sentinel out of Grand Junction. They talked about this one as well. Obviously they're not going to get as granular as we are with the type of spills or materials, that sort of things, like we're doing now. But just kind of a full disclosure note, we're not the only ones seeing it. So just kind of, it's kind of a hats off in a lot of ways to operators and changing operationally what we're doing here. So if you could jump to the next one, Hannah. So this is just a quick trend line graph. It's a little smaller. This is the 2020. This is something we've typically done in the past. We pull out those flow line related spills and then compare them to basically everything else that we see. So the one tweak I did this year was, like I say, since we've added tank maintenance standards, we've pulled those tank related spills out. That's going to be a data point that we're going to continue to talk about moving forward, since the integrity group really kind of had a hand in in adding those tank maintenance, those 3 tank maintenance standards to the new rules. And I would say here that typically the flow line related spills are a bit lower. They usually make up about 1/3 of the total. And this year they are up a little bit. They're in the 45% versus that 30-ish% range. And then the tanks here, they're making up around 10%. So if you want to jump to the next one, Hannah, this is a quick breakdown of similar categories. We're not going to get all the same categories that we would for flow line related spills. We're not going to get a whole ton of outside force damage or excavation damage. That's not something we're expecting to see. So it's a little more narrow, in its categories here. So, but we're trying to use the same nomenclatures. And then just to kind of define this a little bit, what constitutes a tank related spill versus like a flow line related spill. So, and this so like as an example, so the big one there is obviously the equipment failure. So, what will we consider equipment? How is equipment different from the tank itself failing? So if the piece of equipment fails, but it's not the point source of where the spill occurs, that was kind of our line in the sand. So if like a PSV or a blow-off valve fails to blow down fails to blow down, and then it leads to an overflow situation, right? The tank would be the overflow point source in that situation. So that's kind of what we drew out of the Form 19 description. So if there is more detail that can be provided in these cases, please do. But that's kind of the quick breakdown of those. Obviously, in the case of corrosion, Hannah, could you jump to the next slide for us real quick? In the case of corrosion, we're trying to cover that in the new tank maintenance standards, the API 653 12R1 for the smaller stuff, and the SCI SP001. So to try and prevent those big catastrophic ones, just as a kind of a full disclosure here, didn't do as much outreach to get that unknown number down to where the flow line stuff is. Flow lines are still going to be our priority for the spills reports, but just wanted to put that out there just because we do it with all the other pie chart data. So we'll get on to the last slide here. Hannah. This is just a quick one. A couple caveats on this one. Mike Paulus wanted me to speak to this a little bit. Where are the or what type of fluids are we really talking about when we're talking about spills? And he had that's a great point. We haven't gone into a whole ton of nitty gritty on, what are these spills? Predominantly in the past, it's very much in line with what we see here. I think next time around, I'll try and grab that historical data and see if we can't see what's reported there. But that 73% of all spills, that'd be number of occurrences, are produced water for the 2020 year. And as far as just to speak to that, that produced water category, that's typically going to be where we see a lot of those failures. And there's always a couple outliers. So for this one, if we take out those couple outliers, that average drops down quite a bit into the 33 barrels per. And then, just to speak to manageability, what does it really look like? As far as these flow line related spills go, almost half of them are in the sub 10 barrel range. And then, like I say, manageability, what does that mean? 2/3 of those for this year are on location. So typically our flow line related spills are I think they sit about 1/3. It's about 1/3 are on location. So what we're seeing here, like I've mentioned before, we've seen an particular uptick in dump line failures. So there's going to be on location, manageable with it, at the very least, secondary containment. So I just wanted to put this slide out there. You know, that's a really good point that Mike had to include a little bit more disclosure as far as what's being reported for volumes. And then just lastly, I forgot to hit that first point there. You know, if it's not reported correctly on the Form 19, so if it's in like a description, if that volume is reported in a different spot, it's going to be a little more difficult for us to capture on the data when we're putting it together in like a pivot table or whatnot. So just wanted to put that out there. So if we do get a little bit better reporting on like a supplemental, if that is obviously, if EHS staffs are able to actually pinpoint a volume for us, we'll go ahead and include it on future reporting. So, but that's my last slide, guys. Obviously, like Hannah said, I'll try to answer questions if you have any for the end of the presentation here. But I probably won't be able to get any like hard numbers for you right off the top of my head, but I'll definitely reply to everything at the very least by email. So just ask away. So
great. Thank you so much for that, Steve. Great job. And I liked the colorful presentation. That was very nice. We'll take the questions at the end. There's only a couple, so I'm sure that he'll be able to answer those while we're doing the next presentation, which is Reclamation Inspection Status Report with James Stanczyk. And let me just get that prepared. Ooh, I'm just gonna take this out. Is this good, Jane?
No, that can stay. That can stay, Hannah.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jane Stanczyk, the permitting manager. Several members of our staff get periodic requests from industry for them to run what we have called for years the bond release report. And what that report actually is a reclamation inspection status report. And of course we use it to determine if the bond can be released. Has the site passed final reclamation is the bottom line. And so my understanding is that operators don't keep track of all their wells and locations in terms of whether or not they've passed final reclamation. And so they ask staff to run what has been to this point an internal report that we utilize. Next slide, please, Hannah. So this is an example of part of that report, and you can see it indicates the reclamation status of an inspection. All those F's are fails. And next slide, please, Hannah. And then it has these other two groupings. That was just a group of failed reclamation statuses. And then the report includes a group of interim site reclamation status. And then the report for which for most operators is pretty much everything you've got out there, that there's no reclamation status because they're active sites and there hasn't been a reclamation inspection on it. So what I was hoping today was to be able to go to our website and show you where we've now made this accessible for all of you to go in, put in your operator number and get this report. But we don't have that ready yet. We are working on it. So I left the topic here on the agenda just to let you know that this should be available within the next week. And if anyone has questions about it, we can handle those questions at the next training, which will be in 2 weeks. So, we recognize this is a useful tool for you because it's a useful tool for us. We depend on it. to determine whether or not a bond can be released. And so that's it. We hear you. We're going to make it available. It's going to be tweaked a little bit from this. I'm not going to post this presentation because it's not a final product, but we will have some something posted about it when we do get it out for everyone to have access to it. So thanks for your patience on getting this ready for you. Like I said, I thought we'd have it out there today, but we're not quite there. And that's all I had. Thanks, Hannah.
All right, great job. Thanks, Jane. We appreciate that. Let me just, I think I can stop sharing because I don't have one for, Greg is up next with OGLA reminders. So I'm just going to stop the share for a moment so Greg can be the centerpiece.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm not using a mic today. So just a couple of reminders from the OGLA team that we thought would be important to just kind of put back out there. These are things that we've talked about before. So a couple of forms that OGLA is reviewing and conducting a review for protection of public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources. The APDs that are coming in for previously approved or still active oil and gas locations. OGLA is conducting a review in accordance with Rule 308C. And maybe putting conditions of approval on those APDs as we conduct that review. Now, some of those Form 2As did go through objective criteria review with the director, and we are, relying on that as our starting point for how we conduct those reviews. But that's not to say, we're also looking at the current rules as adopted by the commission. So it's not to say that the objective criteria review, maybe didn't have everything that our current rules would require. So for those APDs, we may add additional conditions of approval. Likewise, the OGLA staff is reviewing Form 6, Notice of Intent to Plug Wells. Rule 435A tells us that, again, we need to review those for protection of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. So we are looking at things like the high priority habitat map and looking for, nearby potential wildlife receptors and also potential human receptors. Those are maybe sort of the two highest priority items of that review, and making sure that we're not moving in a plug-in rig right next to a daycare with a playground right there, or moving in a plug-in rig in a habitat where maybe there's a bald eagle with on the nest with eggs, which is actually a situation that we realized through an operator's proactive review. So looking for issues like that and making sure that we're doing our part to manage those operations to protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, wildlife resources. Next, I wanted to mention the guidance that we provided on BMPs, and that's best management practices. In the past, those have been required by certain rules to be placed on the Form 2A, and those requirements, the requirements for specific BMPs to be put on a 2A are no longer in our rules, because instead we've got the requirements for the plan attachments to the Form 2A. So in those plans, it's our expectation that we will see the specific sort of BMPs that pull information out of the plan. And then during the OGLA review of the Form 2A, we will pull those out and place them on the Form 2A, rather than having the operator put them directly on the Form 2A. We'll be able to do that. And that way, if there's an issue with with the plan and a modification to the plan creates a conflict with the BMP, that'll get addressed in that part of the review, and then we'll be able to just move the BMP over from the plan to the Form 2A. So, and then one other thing, this is not an OGLA reminder, this is a new item. Rule 903E states on a Form 2A oil and gas location assessment, the operator will commit to connecting to a gathering system by the commencement of production operations or submit a gas capture plan as an attachment to their Form 2A. We have added a yes or no drop down, or we are adding a yes or no drop down on the equipment and facilities tab of the Form 2A that asks the question, is the operator committed to connecting to a gathering system? That way, if we see that check or that question is answered, yes, they're committing, then we do not need to see a gas capture plan as an attachment. If we see a no, then we need to see the gas capture plan and determine, and include that in our technical review of the Form 2A. So as we were reviewing our processes for conducting a completeness review, we realized that this was a question that we really needed to ask. So as soon as our developers get this data field added to the Form 2A, we will push it out, and all Form 2As that are in process or in draft will be updated to include the question. If the Form 2A is already in process, upload, or in draft. So if the Form 2A is already in our hands, we'll work with the operator to get that answered. And if the form is still in draft, then the operator will need to answer that question. It will be a required data field. And that's all the announcements I have. So the next topic is going to be Sabrina Trask discussing informed consent. And I'm just going to provide, by way of introduction to this, this is a topic that staff has been working really hard on to get some guidance documents and template documents out to you. We have conducted, drafted and peer reviewed and conducted legal review on our documents, and we are getting very close to releasing them. We had hoped to have the documents in your hands for this training, but instead we know that we will get them out before the next training. So we wanted to walk you through the Commission's intent on informed consent, and then when we release the documents, we'll put an announcement on our homepage so you see them there. And then, that'll give you a chance to review the documents and bring questions to our next operator meeting. But we're quite sure that we'll have these out before the next operator meeting. So we really did want to get them in your hands. And with that, I will turn this over to Sabrina for an informed consent introduction.
All right, thanks, Greg. Can you hear me, Hannah?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sabrina Trask, Senior Oil and Gas Location Assessment Specialist. And before I get into this intro, I did want to give a big thanks to Greg Dronlow and John Noto, and especially Joel Miner for their very thoughtful and insightful work on this really important topic. And I also wanted to thank you operators for your continued patience on this. I know some of you are kind of chomping at the bit to get going on informed consent. And it would have been nice if we had gotten this out sooner, but we really needed to take the time to get it right. So like Greg said, we're very, very close. This is going to be released really soon. Next slide, please, Hannah. So today we're going to go over the rule requirements. We've got 2 rules that allow operators to meet certain siting requirements by seeking and obtaining informed consent. We'll talk about the meaning of the word informed and the word consent and discuss the Commission's expectations for both. I'll give you a general description of a template letter and the guidance document we almost have ready for publication, and then I'll finish with some key points and reminders. Next slide, please. So our new rules effectively create a 2,000-foot setback for all new locations, 2,000 feet from residential and high occupancy building units. The commissioners included a couple of different off-ramps for operators to take if they want to propose operations within 2,000 feet of a building unit. One of these off-ramps is informed consent. This exists in two different rules. The first rule is 604A4, which states that no working pad surface will be located less than 500 feet from one or more residential building units not subject to a surface use agreement or waiver that includes informed consent from all building unit owners and tenants. So what this means is that if you want to propose a location that's less than 500 feet from a building unit, a residential building unit, you must have a signed SUA or a signed waiver that includes informed consent. You must also obtain this from every residential building unit that's within 500 feet of your working pad surface. One important thing to remember about this is that informed consent must be obtained from both the building unit owner and the tenant if they are two different people. So for example, if one person owns a house that's 450 feet from the proposed working pad surface, but they live at a different location and they rent that house out to a tenant farmer who lives there year round, you'll need to get informed consent from both of those people. The reason for this is that we want to ensure that the building unit owner, even if they don't live there, the owner is making an informed decision that may impact their property value or their mineral estate if they own the minerals that will be developed. This also ensures that the tenant, who is the person most likely to experience any direct impacts such as noise, light, dust, and odor, is able to make an informed decision that may impact their daily life during certain operational phases. Next slide, please, Hannah. So the second rule is 604B1, and I'm just going to paraphrase the rule here. No working pad surface will be located more than 500 feet and less than 2,000 feet from one or more residential or high occupancy building units unless the building unit owners and tenants within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface explicitly agree with informed consent to the proposed oil and gas location. So again, in this case, if your working pad surface is between 500 and 2,000 feet from one or more residential or high occupancy building units, you must get or ask for informed consent from every building unit owner and every tenant if the building unit owner and tenant are different people. Next slide, please. So this title maybe seems a little bit funny, what is informed, but we've actually had some really very interesting and very in-depth conversations internally about what is informed. So I wanted to share some of that with you. To become informed, a person must have access to all the necessary and relevant information. So in this case, the operator will provide all of the information regarding the proposal, either the OGDP or the location. We'll go over some of those details in a few minutes. Next, the person must review the information thoroughly and in depth. For some people, like those who may already be familiar with oil and gas operations, this shouldn't be too difficult of a task. For others, though, who might not be familiar with oil and gas, this could take a while. Simply reading a packet of information doesn't necessarily count as becoming informed. They might need time to digest the information, and they might have questions about some of it. It will be the operator's job to answer those questions or refer the recipient of the letter to the COGCC website or other websites like CDPHE if the person wants additional information to help them make sense of your proposal. Finally, the recipient must understand the information that they've reviewed. Understanding means they would be able to explain the proposal, the operations, the impacts, the timeline, etc., in their own words if they were asked. Next slide. So then the same thing, what is consent? Consent is a person's decision to give their permission for something. In this case, they're giving the operator permission to locate their proposed operations within 2,000 feet of the recipient's house. But like the word informed, there's some nuance involved. Consent must be voluntary. Certainly an operator can offer compensation or agree to provide beneficial impacts such as landscaping or keeping lights on a timer, but coercion can never be a tactic by which consent is given. In the same vein, compensating a recipient doesn't negate the need for them to be fully informed. Consent must also be based on a specific set of information. For example, if the expectation is that drilling and completing 10 wells will take 4 months, and that's what the person gives consent to. And then later, if the plan changes to 20 wells and 10 months duration, their consent does not cover that change unless it is specifically outlined in advance as a possibility. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear my cat is spazzing out in the background. I apologize for him. Consent must also include the signer's acknowledgement that they are assuming any risks and accepting any impacts as long as those risks and impacts are described and understood. Next slide, please, Hannah. So like Greg mentioned, we do have a template letter. It's so close to being ready. I'm hoping this week, but I won't promise this week. So using this template letter is optional. It's not required by rule. But staff certainly hopes that operators will use this template. You can make it your own. You can tailor it with information specific to your OGDP application and specific to your location that's proposed within 2,000 feet of a building unit. If operators want to write their own letters, we recommend using this template as a guide. If a non-template letter is submitted with your Form 2A as part of your OGDP application, be advised it needs to be substantially equivalent to this template, and it must include all the necessary components. Otherwise, staff or the director or the commission may find that the letter is insufficient for approving the siting of the location as proposed within 2,000 feet of a building unit. So our template is about 4 pages long, 3 pages are informative, and the last page is the decision and signature page. It does have fillable sections where operators can personalize things such as the name and address of the recipient, the operator's contact information, OGDP and location name, nearest crossroads between the building unit and the location, local government permit information, that sort of thing. We envision the template would be used as a cover letter to the information packet that operators will provide to these recipients, giving them sort of the big picture as to why they've received this packet and what they're being asked to do. Next slide, please, Hannah. So the primary components of the template letter include a description of COGCC's oil and gas development plan permitting process and why the recipient has received this request for informed consent. It should include a description of the operator's responsibility to provide all necessary information, which would include the appropriate rule citation, who to contact if the person has any questions, how to find more information on our website. Additionally, information should be provided in plain language. And information may be needed to be provided in the language that the recipient is most comfortable with. So translation is certainly a consideration. The template letter includes a description of the recipient's responsibility to review the information in depth and ask questions if needed so that they can make a fully informed decision whether or not to give their consent. Also, it would include a description of the recipient's rights within the commission's hearing process and an explanation of their right to withhold their consent and the consequences of that withholding. It will also include a signature page with a very clear certification from the recipient that they have read and they understand the information that's been provided to them and they understand the impacts and risks and benefits The signature pages should include a way for them to provide consent or withhold consent, and should include a signature line, printed name, and date. Next slide, please, Hannah.
Hey, I think I got off. I'm sorry. I was trying to read your
Oh,
notes, and then I'm on slide 8.
could
Is
you
it
go
the
to
next one?
slide 9, please?
Okay,
Yes,
sorry about
perfect.
that.
Thank you. So what do operators need to include in the information packet that goes with the informed consent letter? Each packet will be tailored to the individual receiving it. It should clearly illustrate the relationship between the proposed location and operations and that person's building unit. Maps and diagrams should be drafted in a manner that's easy for a lay person to understand, and should be clearly marked so that they can see their house and they can see the distance to the proposed location. It should include the well count and the equipment count, plus a description of some of the larger or more significant equipment types that might be very conspicuous to the recipient. It'll include a breakdown of the proposed timeline, anticipated duration, and a full description of each phase of operations. This should include construction, drilling, completions, flowback, interim rec, production, and final reclamation. So basically a cradle to grave description of all the operations that you would intend to undertake at that location. It should also include a description of some of the commonly experienced impacts, like the traditional nuisance impacts, noise, dust, light, odor, traffic. It will also include a discussion of potential adverse or beneficial impacts. This would include scientific information that discusses potential health impacts that may be attributed to living in close proximity to oil and gas development. So the CDPHE health study might be a good thing to include in your packet. And I won't say most importantly, but certainly importantly, you should include any additional information specific to that location that will help the recipient understand your proposal. This could be local government permit information, unique BMPs that you intend to use on the location, ALA, alternative location analysis considerations, high priority habitat or floodplain accommodations, consultations with other agencies, that sort of thing. Next slide, please, Hannah. So our operator guidance document it's going to be a good document. And I apologize again for not having it ready for you today. This guidance is going to provide details on how you can pursue informed consent. So how to identify the appropriate building units, how to determine or identify building unit owners and tenants and their addresses, reminders to include a method for the signer to respond to the request. Once the informed consent letters have been thoughtfully signed and returned to the operator, they need to be compiled into one single PDF and attached to the Form 2A and submitted as part of the OGDP application. Next slide, please, Hannah. So our guidance document also includes some specific details on what should be provided in the template letter or your informed consent letter, what should be included in the companion packet that goes to the recipients with the informed consent letter. And we've also listed a handful of frequently asked questions and their answers. Next slide, please, Hannah. So some key points to keep in mind when you're developing a request for informed consent. Be sure your letter clearly explains what informed consent is and why you are seeking it. The companion information packet should be detailed, but also presented with enough simplicity that a layperson can be comfortable and understand it. Be ready to accommodate language barriers and be prepared to answer questions. Make it clear to the recipient that their decision should be based on their understanding of the information and that their signature signifies that understanding. And also be prepared to consider a backup plan if informed consent is not given. This could mean that you reconfigure the working pad surface such that wells and equipment are more than 2,000 feet away from any building units, Or you could let the commission decide if your proposal effectively protects public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, thus meeting either Rule 604B3 or 604B4. Or you could request a variance to Rule 604, or you might just decide to move to a different location altogether to develop the proposed mineral acreage. In all cases, you have options to create a sound proposal that doesn't hinge entirely upon obtaining informed consent. Early planning, including the proper use of the alternative location analysis, can help increase the likelihood that your proposal will be successful. I think that's all I have, Hannah.
Great, thank you so much, Sabrina. Great job. And we'll take the questions at the end, but do keep typing those into the chat, please. Next up is Jane Stanzik with the Form 9 questions. And I'm gonna just stop sharing.
Thank you, Hannah. So I don't have any slides, but one question that people are filing Form 9s, both Form 9 intents and Form 9 subsequents. We have not provided guidance for the attestations that the rules require for each of those types of Form 9s. And we're probably not going to prepare any. My only guidance for that is that the selling operator and the buying operator should get together and agree upon language for those attestations. I would expect that you would consult with your legal advisors as to how those should be worded. I would request that the rule says that you're attesting to the information provided in the Form 9. And, you know, we identify forms by their document numbers. That's the best way to have a unique identification. So as we look at the attestations that you attach to your forms, we'll be looking for the E-form document number of that particular Form 9. And certainly for the signatures, just the standard printed name, title, operator, and then of course the signature. So I hope that's an adequate little bit of guidance. I can't give you legal advice, but you can turn to your legal advisors for help in preparing those attachments for the Form 9s. The other question that has come up repeatedly is accounting for related wells and facilities that are not being transferred. The tools that were created for operators to help prepare a Form 9, the one tool that pulls out all the related facilities is what you can rely on to identify those. And then for the incidents, which are unresolved spills, NOAVs, things like that, the other tool gives you all of any given operator's incidents that need to be considered in a Form 9 preparation. And, you know, you'll have to go through those as part of your due diligence to see which of those might be connected to something that's being transferred. So those are some common questions that have come up. I just wanted to share some feedback with everyone on those, and that's all I had. Thanks, Hannah.
Good job. Thanks, Jane. All right. Well, now since we are finished with the presentations, we can jump into these questions. I will just start reading them, and then whoever would like to answer them can jump in. I believe these first two are for you, Steve. The first one is sand erosion included in corrosion?
Sure. So typically how it's been reported is internal corrosion is lumped together with the corrosion numbers. Usually when operators are doing those cutouts of, it's usually like a hard 90. It's just difficult to tell from between the erosion and the pitting combined. So those two tend to get lumped together. So yes.
All right, thanks, Steve. And the next question is, do equipment failures have anything to do with where facilities are located? If facilities are located in fill, is this an issue?
So you may have to help me out with the located in fill part, but I can definitely speak to the first part of that question. So I would say that equipment failures may or may not have a location. Typically, they are going to be on like a tank battery that we do have a defined location for. However, I would say that in some cases we don't have a defined location for. So this is in reference to like our COGCC data. We may not have a location for the equipment on like a meter site, right? It may be a little more clandestine with those metering stations, and sometimes those are off location from say where like a tank battery or right separator, heater treater are located. So that's all I've got.
Great, thanks, Steve. If you need more clarification, you can just type in the question and we will further clarify. The next question is, can you clarify the API integrity standards used for reference by COGCC? Standard well site production tank API 12R1.
Yep, that's me again. So we've got those incorporated into our 600 rule series by reference. I believe this question was from Chris. So, and with all three of those, there's prescriptive tables in all of those that speak to several things. The examination, usually it's defined as examination, where basically anyone with minimal tank inspection experience can go out and do a visual inspection of the external status or the external condition of a tank. However, there's certified examiners. That's the different one, and that's the more prescriptive, every 5 to 20 years for clean out and internal inspection and wall thickness inspections. So that's really those types of prescriptive inspection intervals and definitions for those are available in all three. Obviously with 12R1, that's going to be a little more applicable to the small tanks that we see in the field versus the API 653. Those are typically for very large tanks, right? Those are the ones that are allowed the 30-year interval, the max 30-year interval inspections for internal for the internal side. But yeah, STI as SP001 is very similar to the 12R1. Yeah, they've just got tables for those. But I would say that there's also some special conditions, right? We see a little bit more in this state, moving tanks around, right? We're not going to see that with API 653 style tanks, the big stuff. But specifically, I've seen this in the preventative maintenance, operators bringing in a new tank that they have available that's ready to go, and just replacing in place. So those two are kind of happening. Either option, either replace with new or replace with something that has been repaired, happens. So
great, thank you, Steve. Keep the questions coming in, folks. The next question is regarding the Form 45 location construction reports. The statement of basis and purpose states the Commission intends for Rule 407 to be prospective, not retroactive, and thus will only apply to new oil and gas locations. To clarify, Form 45s are required starting with locations that began construction after January 15th of 2021.
Thank you, Hannah. That question is for me. In accordance with Rule 407, as stated in the question, a Form 45 is required within 45 days for any new or modified oil and gas location for which the construction or modification commenced after January 15th, 2021. So this requirement includes oil and gas locations for which a Form 2A was approved prior to January 15th, 2021, but the permitted activity didn't commence until after January 15th, 2021.
Great, thank you so much, Greg. And the next question is, has there been a decision on the direction button if a building, school, etc. are over 5,280 feet? If you don't know the direction that the cultural distance is, could you use NA button for direction?
So again, that's for me. If the distance to the nearest individual cultural feature is greater than 1 mile, please provide the direction to that feature. The COGCC will consider making a form modification on this once all the forms necessary for implementation of mission change have been completed. However, there is some value in knowing the direction of the nearest receptors, even if it's greater than 1 mile, and especially if it's only slightly greater than 1 mile.
Thank you, Greg. The next question is, for approved and built locations, are informed consents required when operator drills additional approved wells and there are RBUs within 2,000 feet?
So I'll take this unless Sabrina wants to jump in. If well permits are already approved, then no. But staff may ask operators to provide additional notice to those people during our review.
All right, great, thank you. And the next question is, how do we find where the nearest school is or daycare centers?
So there are multiple data sources for those features. So you can use publicly available maps. Google Maps has most schools shown on it. I have not looked at our external layers on our website to determine, but I believe we have school properties shown as an external map layer. For daycare centers, there is a state website, and I will get the information and put it in the chat so that I can check. Also, county assessors have that information on their websites. Thank you, Ashley Noonan. Colorado Shines is the website to identify the childcare facilities.
Awesome, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Ashley. And that's the end of the questions for now. If anyone has any more questions, please go ahead and chat those in. You can also raise your hand if you would like to speak. I'm trying to keep an eye on the hand raises too. Just give folks a minute to type away if they need to submit their questions. All right, while we're waiting to see if anyone types questions in, I'm just gonna share my screen with the next operator training on it as soon as I get that queued up. There we go. The next one is going to be 2 Tuesdays from now, Tuesday after next, which was going to be April 6th. And then that's my email address there at the bottom. If you are not receiving your invites, you might not be on our list. So please email me and I will get you on the list. And then also do check if you think you're on the list and you're not getting emails, go ahead and check your spam folder first. And we use Constant Contact and it gets snatched by the spam folder quite a bit. All right, well, I think the questions have ceased. Of course, you can always keep them for next time, as we'll answer all your questions whenever. So thank you all for being here today. And again, the next operator meeting is going to be Tuesday after next, which is April 6th. And email me if you want to get on the list. Otherwise, hope you all have a great day.
Hannah,
Thank you,
before
everybody,
signs off, I just wanted to follow up on the school information on the COGCC online interactive maps, COGCC
Oh, sure thing.
online
Did you,
interactive maps.
do you want to?
So we do have the school district boundaries on the map. So you can turn those on and determine what school district you're in, and then you can go to the school district website and find where the nearest schools are. So that's how that resource would be used. We don't have school parcels on there. You'd have to coordinate that through the county assessor's website.
Thank you, Greg. Someone else
thank
say
you,
anything?
everyone.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hannah.
Great day. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, everyone, for presenting today. Have a good day. Where is my button? Share.